I am a Henry, and today I bring you another chilling case. Born on March 26, 1988, in Midland, Michigan, Rebekah was the daughter of Sally Kelly and Thomas Benjamin Gay, a certified welder who provided for his family and was well respected in the community for his unwavering faith in God. He was also known for his exceptional horseback riding skills and passion for raccoon hunting. Married on April 3, 1976, Thomas and Sally had 4 children: James, Adam, Deborah, and Rebekah. They were a picture of a happy united family in Midland, until, for reasons that remain unclear, Rebekah's parents separated. This change was difficult for all of them. During her high school years, Rebekah demonstrated a remarkable talent and passion for horses, inherited from her father, and was a member of the equestrian team. Rebekah was described as a beautiful and gentle young woman who embraced life with enthusiasm, always prioritizing her family above all else. She was known for her selflessness, caring more for others than for herself. While in high school, Rebekah volunteered to participate in archery events to raise money for the most needy families in her community. As she entered her youth, love blossomed in Rebekah's life. She fell for a boy whose details remain unknown, but who quickly became a positive influence in her life. It seemed that Rebekah had found her ideal partner in John Douglas White, an outsider who had recently arrived in town. Over time, he not only became an important figure in her life, but also in the lives of her family and the broader community, as he served as the pastor of a local church. John White was born on May 20, 1957, in the United States. During his youth, he served in the U.S. Navy and later worked as a long-haul truck driver. In 1980, at 22 years old, he was living with his first wife in Battle Creek, Michigan. Around this time, he began experiencing what he claimed were mental health issues, which he later used to justify committing some of the most horrific crimes. John had befriended his 17-year-old neighbor, Teresa Morris, and invited her to the basement of his house, claiming he had built an incredible electric car racing track he wanted to show her. Teresa, trusting him, accepted the invitation. However, when she arrived, she found no track. As she turned to ask him about it, John unexpectedly stabbed her under the right shoulder blade, leaving her in shock. She turned to him, trying to comprehend what was happening, only to be met with his sinister smile. John continued the brutal assault, inflicting more than 15 stab wounds to her right shoulder blade. As if that wasn't enough, he strangled her to restrict her airflow, telling her he was sorry and that she was only a woman. He said he had to say goodbye to the world this way because of her gender. The young woman lost consciousness from the savage attack, and John left, believing he had taken her life. John left, believing he had to say goodbye to her world this way because of her gender. The young woman lost consciousness from the savage attack, and John left the woman to seek help from the hospital and to return to the city. However, to his surprise, Teresa survived. After receiving medical attention, she identified him as her assailant, and the authorities were informed of the horrific acts he had committed, including his hateful words toward her for simply being a woman. John was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. During the trial, he attempted to express remorse by admitting his wrongdoing, promising never to repeat his actions, and requesting psychiatric help instead of imprisonment. However, the judge ruled that Teresa had survived the brutal attack by a sheer miracle and sentenced John to a maximum of 10 years in prison, recommending mental health treatment during his incarceration. Prosecutors assured Teresa that the man would never harm her or anyone else again, and she, naively, trusted that promise. After being sentenced, John appealed, claiming his lawyers had failed to request an insanity defense due to the lack of funds for a private psychological examination. The court accepted his appeal and scheduled a retrial for 1983. Before this retrial, prosecutors offered him a plea bargain in which he would plead guilty, receive psychiatric treatment, and serve only 2 years in prison. Without hesitation, John accepted the deal. In 1985, he was released, unaware to Teresa, who had no idea of the plea agreement or his release. She was confronted with the terrifying reality of encountering him in public. Although John received some psychological treatment and visited a psychiatric hospital, there was no follow-up, and he resumed his normal life. In the early 1990s, he worked in maintenance at a textile company in Calhoun County, Michigan. He remained married with 2 children, including one named Gabriel, while his wife was pregnant with their 3rd child. His family life, however, did not prevent him from beginning an extramarital affair with a 26-year-old woman named Vicky, whom he met at his workplace. Their brief romance came to an abrupt end when Vicky mysteriously disappeared in July 1994. A full investigation was launched to locate her, but the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remained a mystery. Police discovered a surveillance video from a supermarket parking lot that showed the young woman getting into a black van driven by a bearded man. At approximately 3 a.m., investigators believed this footage marked the last time the woman was seen alive and began to inquire further. Witnesses reported seeing the couple that morning, and several corroborated that Vicky had entered John's vehicle. Experts confirmed that the car in the video belonged to John, and they proceeded to summon him for questioning. During the police interview, John admitted to having a clandestine relationship with the young woman, but claimed that on the day of her disappearance, he had dropped her off safely at home. Several weeks passed with no sign of Vicky, until a young man walking in a field stumbled upon 2 drag marks in the brush. Curious, he followed the trail and first found a pair of white sneakers. As he ventured further, he discovered women's clothes and garbage bags emitting a nauseating odor. His blood ran cold when he noticed a human skull partially visible in the debris. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police. Upon arrival, officers conducted a further investigation and confirmed the presence of a human skull. Thanks to dental records, the victim was identified as Vicky. However, the body's advanced state of decomposition, coupled with the limited technology available at the time, resulted in a poor autopsy report. The cause of death could not be conclusively determined. The coroner, relying on various clues, concluded that a crime had been committed. The young woman had been found unclothed, with her bra tied around her neck, suggesting it had been used to restrict her airflow. The young woman had been found unclothed, with her bra tied around her neck, leading investigators to assume that the garment had been used to restrict her airflow and blood circulation, possibly in an attempt to cover up the crime. The police re-interviewed John and requested he submit to a polygraph test, but he refused, and they were unable to compel him to take it. They also searched the interior of his truck for evidence, but the results were inconclusive, as DNA testing techniques at the time were not entirely reliable. The investigation into Vicky's death continued with growing pressure on John, who was considered the prime suspect. A few days later, John attempted to take his own life by ingesting a combination of pills and alcohol. During a subsequent interview, he confessed to a sheriff's deputy that he had experienced episodes of unconsciousness, during which he believed he had committed violent acts that he could not remember. He implied that he might have harmed Vicky during one of these amnesiac episodes. John was brought before a judge and once again negotiated a plea bargain. On May 8, 1995, he pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to a term ranging from 8 to 15 years in prison, the maximum sentence a judge could impose for this type of case. During the sentencing hearing, John apologized to Vicky's family, describing the event as a tragic accident. While in prison, he worked as an apprentice and attended therapy sessions, where he disclosed having frequent violent fantasies involving the crimes of women, including his prosecutor and defense attorney. Although both parties were notified of his statements, no further action was taken, and after serving 12 years, John was released from prison on February 11, 2007. Reports indicated that John had participated in several therapy programs designed for violent offenders and had supposedly reintegrated into society. However, his son Gabriel gave a television interview in which he expressed concerns about his father's mental health, stating that he believed John should not have been released, despite the family's warning. After being warned by his own family, John left prison and moved to northern Michigan, seeking solace in religion. He settled in a small community near the city of Montond, where he became the pastor of a modest congregation that respected him and viewed him as a good man. There, he started a new life, distancing himself from his dark past. John soon began a relationship with Rebekah, Sally's mother, and shared with her only that he had once faced legal troubles, claiming it wasn't really his fault. He concocted a story in which he downplayed the severity of his past, telling Rebekah that he had been with a girl who overdosed, simplifying his history and shifting the blame onto circumstances beyond his control. This false narrative not only earned him the trust of those around him, but also their sympathy, as they believed he had been unfairly treated by the authorities. As time passed, Sally grew closer to John, and they even held an engagement ceremony. Eventually, Rebekah became pregnant, and in 2009, at the age of 21, she gave birth to their son Conway. Although the relationship with Conway's father did not thrive, Rebekah worked tirelessly to provide the best life she could for him. She earned a certification in cosmetology, which led her to a management position at a retail store in Pleasant. With her newfound financial stability, she was able to buy a home in a mobile home park in Isabella County. Rebekah took immense pride in creating a comfortable home for herself and her son. In 2010, her life took another positive turn when she met Aaron, a man who seamlessly fit into her life and offered both her and Conway the love and support they had longed for. With a beautiful son, a steady job, a loving partner, and a place to call home, Rebekah's life seemed to be perfect. Rebekah had the unwavering support of her family and friends, especially her mother, who was her greatest ally. Her mother's fiancé, who had grown to be a grandfather figure to her son Conway, often offered to care for him, fulfilling his role as both a shepherd and a trusted figure in their lives. However, beneath the surface of serenity and kindness, John harbored dark, violent fantasies that he kept hidden from everyone, but which he longed to unleash sooner or later. On October 31, 2012, a chilling night began with Rebekah, who had always cherished Halloween for its special memories, feeling unusually excited. Conway had picked out her costume, and she had decorated her house with great care. The 24-year-old had switched her work shift that day so she could take Conway trick-or-treating in the evening. However, things took a worrying turn that morning when Rebekah did not show up at work, which was completely out of character for her. One of her co-workers attempted to contact her but couldn't reach her, heightening the concern that something might be wrong. A group of co-workers, along with Rebekah's fiancé Aaron, went to her home to check on her. Upon arriving, they found the door was unlocked with no signs of forced entry. Rebekah's car was parked a few meters away in the lot of a nearby bar. The bar staff confirmed she hadn't been there, so her friends decided to call the bar's owner to ask for the keys to her house. When they entered, they found no sign of Rebekah, but they did find her favorite purse, a gift that Aaron had given her. It was the purse she always carried with her wherever she went. With growing uncertainty, Rebekah's family decided to report her disappearance to the police. However, since she was an adult, authorities did not immediately take action, opting to wait until 4 p.m., the time when Conway was supposed to be picked up. When the devoted mother never arrived, they understood that only in an extreme situation would she fail to show up, and they began searching for her. During the investigation, authorities conducted a search of Rebekah's home and car. Experts discovered signs of a struggle, including a red stain on the carpet, which appeared to have been attempted to be cleaned. Additionally, when searching her car, investigators noticed that the driver's seat was unusually adjusted, considering Rebekah's small frame. These clues pointed to the possibility that something serious had occurred, and that the culprit was likely someone close to her rather than a stranger. As the search continued, everyone wondered who could possibly want to harm such a well-loved young woman. Detectives began questioning those closest to Rebekah, initially focusing on her fiancé, Aaron. During the interview, Aaron expressed deep concern and offered to cooperate fully, providing every detail that the officers requested. He explained that he had spoken with Rebekah the night before, and everything seemed fine. However, the messages sent that morning appeared unchecked, which suggested that her phone had either been turned off or was offline. This information helped the police establish a potential time frame for her disappearance. Conway's father, though not offering much information, mentioned that John had taken the boy home that morning, which was a regular routine every Wednesday. When this was brought up, detectives interviewed John, who provided details of his actions that morning, stating that he had arrived at the house around 6:30 a.m. but had never seen Rebekah as she was in the bathroom. While his story seemed plausible, detectives noticed he had visible wounds on his nose and hands, which he attributed to an accident with a stun gun. Despite John's apparent sincerity, the investigation revealed that several of Rebekah's acquaintances had a very different perspective of him. Her co-workers were the first to express distrust, as Rebekah had confided in them on multiple occasions about feeling uncomfortable around him. Aaron, her fiancé, also shared concerns, noting John's obsessive behavior, which seemed increasingly anxious to be around more than usual. All of these signs pointed to John, prompting investigators to decide that the best course of action would be to subject him to a polygraph test. Although John initially hesitated, he ultimately agreed to take the test. During the session, it was revealed that he had a criminal record, including an attempted murder charge involving a teenage girl. Although John tried to downplay the severity of the case, his admission only raised further suspicions among the detectives. They realized he was manipulating the details of his past, offering contradictory explanations during other parts of the polygraph test. This prompted the authorities to delve deeper into his background, uncovering a series of responses that indicated a profound disdain for women. From this point on, he became the prime focus of the investigation. The authorities informed John that the results of his polygraph indicated he was lying, but he continued to deny any involvement in Rebekah's disappearance. With the urgency of the case growing, investigators sought and obtained a search warrant for his arrest. Upon examining his vehicle, they uncovered more damning evidence, including stains that appeared to be blood, along with additional clues such as a broken necklace and other disturbing items that further linked him to the crime. John maintained his innocence throughout the investigation, even going so far as to tell the authorities that, as a religious pastor, he had asked his congregation to pray for Rebekah, who was still missing at the time. Despite his continued denials, he was placed under preventive arrest. On the first day of interrogation, he insisted on his innocence, claiming that he would never harm the young woman. However, his resistance slowly began to falter. After a series of emotional tactics from the investigators, John finally seemed willing to speak. The officers began to describe in vivid detail the case against him, which broke down his defenses. His confession came after intense psychological pressure, with John revealing disturbing and chilling details. According to the officers involved, his confession was a mix of cynicism and terror, as he openly discussed his twisted cravings to engage in necrophilic acts. He explained that in the weeks leading up to Halloween he had experienced recurring sexual fantasies that involved the use of force, fantasies now centered around Rebekah's corpse. John's confession went beyond mere impulse. It became clear that his actions were premeditated. He admitted that on October 31, he felt an uncontrollable urge to act on his dark desires. He had knocked on Rebekah's trailer door that morning, and when she opened it, he surprised her by attacking her with a rubber mallet he had concealed. striking her in the head until she lost consciousness. He then strangled her with a nylon cord, taking her life in a cold, calculated act. Afterward, John transported Rebekah's lifeless body in his vehicle, initially intending to leave it at a bar to stage the scene of a crime. However, he changed his plan and chose a more isolated location, a grove of pine trees near an intersection. After disposing of the body, he returned to Rebekah's trailer, woke up her young son Conway and dressed him in his Halloween costume, pretending as if nothing had happened. John continued to act as if nothing had happened, even going through the motions of returning the boy to his father in an attempt to avoid arousing suspicion. The authorities were eventually able to recover Rebekah's body, and a forensic examination confirmed that the cause of death was asphyxia due to neck compression. Evidence of sexual abuse was also discovered, deepening the gravity of the case. Initially, John attempted to deny the abuse, but later he claimed that he was completely out of control and couldn't remember much of his actions. After his confession, he was given the chance to call Rebekah's mother. During this conversation, he expressed that Rebekah had been the love of his life and that they would probably never see each other again. The coldness of John's actions and the damage he caused, betraying Rebekah's trust and the affection of her family, shocked and devastated the community. The news hit like a thunderbolt, especially among his parishioners, who had seen him as a respected spiritual leader, unaware of the darkness he had been concealing. This revelation sparked a public outcry about the failures of the justice system, from the prosecutor's office to those in charge of the penitentiary system. Many found it inexplicable that John, a man with a violent criminal history, had been allowed to remain free, with no one monitoring him or warning the community of the potential danger he posed. Citizens expressed their palpable frustration, feeling betrayed by a system that had failed to prevent such a tragedy. The decisions that had allowed John to walk free were harshly criticized, particularly by Teresa, the first person John had assaulted, who voiced her outrage upon hearing of his latest crime. Rebekah's family, especially Conway, mourned not only for their loss but also for their misplaced trust in John. Others reflected on the warnings that John's own son had given about the dangers of his release from prison, adding a layer of tragic irony to the entire case. John's son had been certain that his father would return to violence, and alongside the ongoing public debate, the time came for Rebekah's loved ones to begin making preparations for her final farewell. They gathered for a candlelight vigil to celebrate her life and mourn her tragic passing. Days later, they convened at the Methodist Church in Midland, where they held a memorial service to offer their last prayers for her soul. Karen's mother noted with sorrow that her son had purchased an engagement ring, intending to propose to Rebekah on that very Halloween night, a day so significant to her. She lamented that John's horrific actions had stolen that precious moment from the couple, robbing them of what should have been a joyous occasion and a hopeful future for Conway. Those present at the memorial described Rebekah as a young woman with a voice as sweet and gentle as an angel's, always ready to lend a hand to those in need. Her friends set up a donation page to cover the funeral costs and establish a trust fund for little Conway, ensuring his future was cared for despite the loss. On November 8, 2012, John was transferred from the Isabella County Jail to the trial court for his preliminary hearing. This hearing was to determine whether there was enough evidence for the case to be moved to the circuit court, where he would face charges of first-degree murder and premeditated homicide. However, the proceeding had to be rescheduled to allow time for a psychiatric evaluation to determine his mental competency to stand trial and if he could be held criminally responsible for his actions. By early 2013, after undergoing mental health tests, John was declared mentally competent to face trial. Nevertheless, on January 23, he chose to waive the preliminary hearing. By March 27th of that same year, after reaching a plea agreement with the prosecution, the case would move forward in a way that would ultimately shape his fate. John pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder and, as part of the agreement, was subjected to an abbreviated trial. Prosecutors emphasized that the crime had been premeditated, as John had spent 2 weeks contemplating the decision to end Rebekah's life, according to the affidavit filed in court. Before committing the crime, John admitted to drinking several beers and watching explicit adult content featuring violent scenes and even lifeless bodies. The investigator in charge of the case testified that John showed no concern for the fact that Rebekah's 3-year-old son, Conway, was asleep in the house at the time of the attack. After beating Rebekah and taking her life, John stripped her naked and touched her, though he claimed not to remember whether or not he sexually abused her. He later disposed of the stained towels he had used to clean up the blood and the rubber mallet by placing them in a large garbage bag. John also discarded the bag, phone, and other items at the trailer park dumpster while he left the body in a secluded intersection, attempting to stage the scene to make it appear as though Rebekah had been taken against her will. A former colleague of John, a man with whom he had traveled as a long-haul truck driver, testified about John's behavior. While the colleague described John as generally sociable and quiet, he recounted an incident where John had behaved violently by insulting a female employee of the transportation department who was changing a flat tire. The colleague stated that although John was typically calm, he had always considered him a pervert. John White's relationship with sex workers had mirrored the same behavior he exhibited during his time in the Navy, reflecting his pattern of dehumanizing others. After Vicky's disappearance, John confided in a friend, discussing the idea of taking his own life to spare his family the shame and pain of another trial. He mentioned that he planned to end his life within a week, leaving letters to explain his actions. However, he never followed through on this plan. The friendship between John and Vicky's friend eventually ended after the crime, and the friend had intended to testify for the prosecution, but could not due to a brain hemorrhage he suffered a year before. Many years later, John revealed to the friend that he had become an ordained pastor, claiming his sins had been forgiven. On April 18, 2013, the sentencing hearing took place. It gave Rebekah's family an opportunity to express their profound grief. A letter from Sally, Rebekah's mother, was read aloud, expressing her devastation over the brutal crime and the deep impact of losing her daughter. She pleaded with the judge to impose the maximum sentence on John, the man who had taken the heart and soul of her family. Rebekah's Aunt Deborah spoke out, demanding the creation of a registry for violent criminals like John, insisting that had his violent history been known, her sister might still be alive. She criticized the authorities for their failure to keep violent offenders like John imprisoned, which directly contributed to Rebekah's tragic death. After hearing the heartfelt testimony from Rebekah's loved ones, 55-year-old John White was sentenced to 56 years and 3 months in prison, the maximum sentence permitted under Michigan's plea agreement. While the sentence felt harsh to John and his attorneys, for Rebekah's family, it seemed inadequate given the irreparable damage he had caused. The magnitude of the damage John White caused was profound. However, his actions ultimately robbed the aggrieved of a sense of justice. This time, however, he did so in a more radical way. Just 4 months later, on August 28, 2013, he was found lifeless. At 4 a.m. in his cell at the Michigan Reformatory, prison officials attempted to revive him, but it was too late. The Department of Corrections issued a statement confirming that John, aged 56, died from asphyxiation, a result of his own actions. John's story serves as a chilling example of how an individual with a violent past can negotiate plea deals, deny mental health problems, and evade true justice, continuing to take innocent lives along the way. It underscores the responsibility of authorities to properly monitor violent offenders and illustrates how the justice system can sometimes become a trap for those it is meant to protect. This case highlights the need for prevention and appropriate intervention to prevent similar tragedies from recurring. Though the system is imperfect, representatives of the US justice system have emphasized that under current laws, John would have spent many years behind bars after injuring his teenage neighbor. He would have been placed on a violent offender registry, and his DNA would have been added to the national database. By 2024, more effective prevention measures will be in place to help avoid cases like this one in the future. And so, dear audience, this concludes our investigation. What are your thoughts on today's case? We greatly value your comments and perspectives. Please remember to be respectful of the victim and fellow viewers as you share your opinions. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who might find it interesting. See you next time for another criminal investigation. Goodbye.